Hi guys. Um, this is Dr. Alicia Wax Thomas with you here again, and this is part 4 of the outline for your first test for History 101 Western Civ. We last left off on the outline with the slide dealing with ancient Egypt, and we covered the three major kingdoms of the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, the New Kingdom, with two intermediate periods in between. A brief little snippet about some of the religious aspects of ancient Egypt, and a little bit about their use of writing and also the art that was left behind. Okay. So next up on the outline, we're now moving to what is known as the ancient Near East. And under the ancient Near East, there will be a few groups that we're going to, or that I will briefly cover. All right, so first off, when I say the ancient Near East, what am I talking about? I'm talking about this area right up in here. This is where we're going to start. The Hittites are going to come over here, and this is the Asia Minor right here, modern day Turkey, and then right up in here. How I tell students, sometimes there's a confusion about what is meant by Near East, Middle East, and Far East. Okay, so first off, let's just get a working definition of what is the East. Typically, from our culture, and I'm an American, from our cultural standpoint, we think of the East as Asia. Okay, the continent of Asia. So if you take Asia, and I tell students the simple way to do this, divide it up. All right, so if you got what part of Asia, we're in Alabama, what part of Asia is closest to us? That would be the Near East. So we're right up in here. Okay, and then what is in the furthest away from us, and or farthest away from us, and that would be here. Okay, so this is where you're at when you're in China and Japan and all of that. That is considered the Far East. And then what is in the middle between the near and the far? So right up in here. Okay, so when we say the Near East, this is what we're talking about. We're right over here, that portion of Asia that is closest to us land-wise. All right, and just a little snippet I want to point out here, since we've been covering it. The Mesopotamian region, this is Mesopotamia right here again. You have your Tigris and your Euphrates rivers right here. So this is the Nile, this ancient Egypt, what we've already covered thus far. Okay, so hopefully this will kind of help you get a better visualization. All right, so going back to the outline here, we're going to start with your Hittites first, your Hittites. Okay, and the Hittites, where did they have their civilization? The Hittites created a powerful civilization here on this piece of land known as the Asia Minor. Okay, this is the Asia Minor. This is modern day Turkey right here. Right, so this is where the once again your Hittites had their empire right here on this Asia Minor. I'm trying to find some maps here that will better show you their powerful kingdom, but I think we're going to go back over here to this one, the Asia Minor. All right, so what I want you to know about the Hittites, the Hittites were able to establish an empire in this area known as the Asia Minor, probably somewhere around 1500 BC. They'd actually arrived there. Some believe that they'd actually arrived in the area. The Hittites did not originate on the Asia Minor, but they arrived there maybe as early as 2000 BC, and give about 5 centuries, by the time you get to 1500 BC, they had been able to create a very powerful empire. The capital of their empire was a city known as Hattusus, and what I'm saying is spelled Hattusus, Hattusus, and this was their capital. The Hittites were able to dominate this area for over 300 years. And the big deal about the Hittites, while you're really seeing them in the textbooks, please get this down. This is put a star by it, underline it, highlight it moment, is that the Hittites are credited with bringing the smelting of iron to the east. Okay, once again, they're credited with bringing the smelting of iron to the east. Iron is a game changer. It's a heavier, it's a sturdier, more durable metal. Whoever has the iron has the better weapons. Okay, so huge deal there. And we have evidence that the Hittite warriors used iron weapons, and this greatly contributed to their success. Despite its military power and its military might, many scholars often report that the Hittite Empire suddenly collapsed. It fell. It's believed that, and I'm not going to test you on these dates here, but it's believed that it fell around 1190 BC. And the primary reason for the fall was you had a great wave or intensive amount of invasions to occur, and you had tribes to come in from the north to burn the capital city. And from there, it just kind of had that ripple effect, and the rest of it came down as well. I often tell students that is a very age-old military tactic to target the capital city. And I tell students, think of it this way: if you can cut the head, and the head would be the capital, if you can cut the head or kill the head, cut the head away from the body will die. So if you can successfully bring down the capital, the thought often is that you can discombobulate, that you can cause massive interruptions, and you can cause the rest of the empire to fall apart. And it is a very successful military tactic or method that is still employed to this very day. So keep that in mind. All right, your next group, your Assyrians, the Assyrians. Now, the Assyrians came from the northern portion of the Mesopotamian region, and the Assyrians, they were a very powerful group. Not to say that the others were not, but the Assyrians exceptionally so. So this is the Mesopotamia once again, the Tigris River, the Euphrates River, and the Assyrians came from this area here known as Assyria. They were known for establishing a powerful empire, and they were also known for helping to unite people of the Middle East. The Assyrians, what I want you to really get about them is that they had exceptional military might. Now, the rest of the groups covered had strong militaries. They had to in order to build those empires. As I told you, people do not give away land. Typically, you're going to have to force it away from them. People typically do not give up rule of themselves. Usually, you have to force control over them. That is what history has shown us often. You can find, of course, the exceptions, but that's not the norm. So with the Assyrians were able to build a tremendous empire, and it was unbelievable. Okay, the Assyrians are going to take all of this over. All right, and so with the Assyrians, many scholars have really zeroed in and tried to study more in depth as to why were the Assyrians able to gain as much military might as they were, or as they were able to get that they had. One of the leading theories out there is that the Assyrians first developed in an exposed, flat area. I'm from Auburn, or I live in Auburn. I'm not originally from Auburn, but I live in Auburn. So I often tell my students, think of the plains, okay, how Auburn sits on the plains, a flat land area. And because it was exposed, because it was a flat area, it it's thought that the Assyrians had to develop a very strong defense mechanism in order to protect themselves. And it's thought that they were able to become um, so strong defensively to where they were able to turn it around and use it offensively and actually then take that might and conquer others. The Assyrians had very advanced engineering skills for this time frame. Their soldiers were well equipped. We have evidence that the soldiers were equipped with metal armor. They had stiff leather as far as helping to protect them. They wore helmets. There are some who have evidence that they made use of padded loincloths. Um, they had, of course, great shields and swords, and one of the things that really helped them was that they also made use of advanced planning. They planned in advance as far as their warfare tactics. And there's also evidence that the Assyrians made use of spies to gain a lot of information before attacking. Um, you have those who are reporting that if they came across what others would have considered probably impassable places and they couldn't move forward to try to take over an enemy's territory, the Assyrians made a way around it. So, for example, they had the engineering skills to build bridges over rivers. They had pontoons. They knew how to float structures. They had the tenacity to know how to dig beneath the protective city walls to weaken them of other city states that they were about to attack, and then at the same time make use of foot soldiers as well as a cavalry. The Assyrians also they scalped, they headed people. Reportedly, their soldiers would receive a bounty for severed heads. The Assyrians were known as a group who greatly exploited people. Um, and with the Assyrians, typically, sometimes you'll read in some textbooks that the Assyrians put people in one of two major categories. You could either be a slave or you could be free. Okay. Not a whole lot else was known about their social structure, but there definitely was a social structure. And of course, common sense, you didn't want to be on the slave side if you were part of the Assyrian social structure. Another thing I want you to get down because it's going to come up again. The Assyrians. This is the group that destroyed Babylon, and they destroyed Babylon around 689 BC. All right, so get that in your notes. This is the group that destroyed Babylon around 689 BC, because it's going to come up again when as we move on down through this outline or through these PowerPoint topics. All right, so also still dealing with the Assyrians as far as the economy of the Assyrians. The backbone of the economy was farming. This is going to be the case for darn near all of your ancient civilizations, with a very small exception of just a small tiny few. And at the top of my head right now I'm thinking of one in particular that's coming up next. But farming is the backbone. Once again, you've heard me say it before, in other parts of this outline, that if you do not have the food, you cannot sustain the people. You must have the food to sustain the people. In some parts of America, farming is still the backbone of the economy. Think of Alabama. Farming is a huge part of our economy. Okay? And I'm proud of it. Personally, I know some people that snub their noses at it, but I often tell people when you snub your noses at farmers, you have to remember they're the ones feeding you too at the same time. Okay? So I say hats off to farmers and I thank them for all that they do. But anyway, I digress. So let's getting back here. So with the economy backbone of their economy once again was farming. They also did engage in trade, a lot of trade, and it's believed that they traded great distances. Um, they had received items from very faraway lands and traded in faraway lands. But what happened to the Assyrians? Just as the Assyrians had destroyed so many of the cities, the same thing was eventually done to them. And I want you to get in your notes. I'm not necessarily going to test you on the date, but I want you to get in your notes so you can kind of keep it straight somewhat and understand what's going on. In the year 612 BC, Nineveh, 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 which is the was the capital of Assyria. Nineveh was destroyed. Okay, Nineveh was located along the Tigris River. Okay, and so that's when Assyria fell, was 612. Now, once again, Assyria is the one that brought down the Babylonians in 689 BC. Okay, all right, so moving on with the outline. Next up on the outline, we go to the Palestinian region. And with the Palestinian region, there are going to be some two groups, the Phoenicians and the Hebrews, that a brief little snippet will be on here. So let's see here. Let's get to the map. Okay. So this is where we're at here. This is Phoenicia. When you think of Phoenicia, I tell students, think of modern day Lebanon. Okay. The Phoenicians, they were powerful traders. Get that in your notes. That's their claim to fame. They were powerful traders, whereas the Assyrians were known as this huge military might, the claim to fame for the Hittites, the smelting of the iron. So remember what I told you in previous segments of this outline. Always think, what is the claim to fame? If you had to say this is what they're really known for, that would be it. The Phoenicians were really known as your sea traders. They were never really quite united into a single country in the ancient world. Instead, the Phoenicians were known for founding a number of wealthy city-states along around the Mediterranean basin. So that would be like around the Mediterranean Sea, one of which we're going to cover when we get to the Romans, and that would be Carthage, but that's not going to be covered in this lesson for this test. Another thing I want you to get down about the Phoenicians were great ship builders, S-H-I-P, ship builders. And it makes sense because they were sea traders. So you needed the ships to sail all along the sea. Okay. It is believed that the Phoenicians may have been one of the first groups, or maybe even the first group, to sail as far as the Strait of Gibraltar. The Strait of Gibraltar, that's right here. This is Spain. This is Africa, okay, and so the Strait of Gibraltar is that little slip of water, which is not little by at all, but it's that piece of water, that canal of water that runs between Europe, the Spanish Peninsula, and northern Africa, and then you flow into the Mediterranean Sea, okay, and so all of this right here is your Mediterranean Sea, and then you have the Phoenicians that are located right over in here, okay. Another thing about the Phoenicians, and put a star by this, highlight it, underline it. I sometimes tell students, put some sugar dust on it. Do whatever you got to do. Make it stand out in your notes. The Phoenicians, their greatest legacy to the West was the concept of an alphabet. Okay, once again, the concept of an alphabet. Your Phoenician merchants, they needed a way to record transactions clearly and quickly. Okay, two things, clearly and quickly. And so they developed a writing system that they used symbols to represent sounds. And as they traveled and introduced this writing system to their partners, some of the others, kind of caught on to it and began to use it themselves. But this is their greatest legacy, the concept of an alphabet. I tell students, when I look at the word Phoenicians, I think of the word phonics. Okay? So, if we go back and you think back into your notes from previous parts, and you look at, I believe it was part 2, where we covered the characteristics of a civilization, and one of them was record keeping, right? In order for the group to be classified as civilized, they have to have evidence of where they kept written records. The Phoenicians were civilized, right? That's a huge part of being civilized, the ability to keep written records. That is their greatest legacy. So once again, the Phoenicians, they were sea traders. They were located, once again, along, let me find it, find a better one for you here. Well, I can do that one too, I guess. But they were located here in the Palestinian region of, some people call it the Levant, right? But right here. And they were greatest known for their sea trading abilities. They may have actually been the first ones from this area to sail as far west as the Strait of Gibraltar. Great ship builders, which makes sense because they need the ships for their livelihoods. The backbone of their economy was trading. It was not farming. Remember, I told you the farming was it would be the backbone of just about all the economies, with the exception of a small number that did not follow that that norm. Your Phoenicians, they're one of the exceptions. Okay, all right. So next up, your Hebrews. Your Hebrews. I sometimes call this the Big Daddy group. Not to say that the other groups are not important. All of them are important. But the Hebrews for the West, especially those of us who are Jewish, Christian, and Muslim, the Hebrews are exceptionally important. Why? Because this is the group that introduced the concept of monotheism to the West, the belief in one God. Okay? It's going to be your Hebrews. All right? So when we start with the Hebrews, it's typically taught that the Hebrews started in the Mesopotamian region. So here we have a map of Mesopotamia. Here we have these two rivers again. You have your Tigris and your Tigris over here, your Euphrates River over here. Okay, and then you have these various city-states. Okay, so with the city-state of it is believed that a man by the name of Abraham. Now, if you are a scholar, a biblical scholar, you probably know that he was not Abraham just yet. He was Abram. Okay, but for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to say Abraham. All right, so you had a man named Abraham that came from here. All right, and Abraham left out of the city-state of and he took a group of people and he led them over to what is known as the Palestinian region. Okay, now you have two teachings here. You can go with the secular teaching of the people left this area because there was evidence of economic strife and social turmoil, and so they left seeking better opportunities, a better place to live. Or you can go with biblical teachings of he left this area because his God, the Christian God, the Jewish God, the God of the founder of Islam, that God, God told him to leave. I'm not here to get into a debate of which version of that you want to go with. I personally, as I've told you on the front end, I'm a Christian. I go with God told him to do it. But you feel free to go with it was, economic strife, social strife. So I'm not really going to be testing you on that kind of stuff. I'm not. I want you to know, what I do want you to know is where did they start? They started here in the city-state of That's something that's agreed upon. Okay, so that's something I will test upon. This is where they started off. Okay, then he led them out, he being Abraham, and they wound up in the Palestinian region. All right. Okay. The reason why I'm not going to heavily test on, you decide on which side you're going to go with that reason. So he moved his people to this Palestinian region. If you're a biblical scholar, you know we call it Canaan. Okay, I'm not going to test you on that, but it sometimes is used to refer to all of ancient Palestine. If you're wanting more information on this from a Christian perspective, you can find it in the book of Genesis. Okay, when did all of this take place? Now this is debated. For a long time, you had scholars saying that this was happening roughly around 2000 BC, somewhere in that era. Now you're having people to come out with information saying that that timeline is totally wrong. So when did it happen? That's a question. That's a question that still is being highly debated. All right, so the move is going to start, like I said, and then they're roughly going to wind up over here. Okay, so when you wind up over here, then you're going to go through some generations here. You're going to have Isaac, who was the son of Abraham. Okay, now this is where you're going to get a split to happen religiously, which may be helpful if you're not already aware of this. That may help you later on when we get to Islam. For those who are Muslim, what happened was Abraham had a son named Ishmael. According to the teachings, biblical teachings, as well as some secular teachings, Abraham had been promised by his God that he and his wife Sarah would have a son. For a very, 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 notice how many berries I've said, for a very long time, he and his wife had no children. And so his wife really was worried, concerned about him having an heir to pass on his goods and so forth to. So she had her husband Abraham to sleep with her servant, a woman by the name of Hagar. So Hagar got pregnant by Abraham, and she had a son for him, and his name was Ishmael. Okay, later on, Sarah wound up getting pregnant, as had been promised by the God of Abraham. And she had a son too, and his name was Isaac. Okay, well, now you got Ishmael, who is actually the oldest, and you have Isaac. And Sarah wasn't too happy now that Ishmael was around, because she now had Isaac. So she wanted Ishmael and his mama, Hagar, she wanted them gone. All right. So Abraham basically got rid of Hagar and Ishmael. Okay, and you can read more about that once again in Genesis, but he got rid of them, and this is where you get that split. For those who practice Judaism and Christianity, they're following the lineage of Isaac. For those who practice Islam, they're following the lineage of Ishmael. But at the end of the day, Ishmael and Isaac had the same daddy, and his name was Abraham. And they both claimed that their God was the God of their father, Abraham. Okay, so it's all coming back up into that. All right, so Abraham is where we're stemming from. The God of Abraham is where these three monotheistic religions of the West stem from. Judaism came first, then we're going to have Christianity. We haven't gotten there yet in the notes, and that won't come until about test 3. And then Islam, which is going to come around test 4 after the fall of Rome. Okay? All right, so going back here, we go back to Isaac. So we're going with this lineage of Isaac here. So Abraham has a son named Isaac, all right? Then, and they're living here, Okay. Then Isaac has a son named Jacob, right? And then Jacob had 12 sons. I want you to get that in your notes. Okay, Jacob had 12 sons. All right, it is during the time of Jacob and his 12 sons where a famine will hit this area. Okay, a famine hit. And what have I told you over and over? If you do not have the food, you will not have the people. So they were starving. If there's a famine, you're starving. So it's during this time in history when this famine is taking place that Egypt is doing well. Egypt is prospering. So what happened was Jacob is going to send his sons to Egypt to seek food. Now, those of you who are biblical scholars, I'm skipping over Joseph, one of my favorite stories in the Bible, but I'm skipping over Joseph, and I'm just trying to stick really to more of the secular teachings here. Okay? So, anyway, Jacob sends his sons in search of food, all right? So they come into Egypt, all right? Eventually, the Hebrews relocate to Egypt. They are allowed to come into Egypt. And it is taught typically that when the Hebrews first entered into Egypt, that they were not enslaved. Okay? They were not enslaved. They were actually treated quite well. Okay? However, as time passed, as generations of Hebrews came and died and new ones were born, it changed. It changed drastically, and the Hebrews were greatly oppressed. They were basically enslaved. All right. So, where are we at on the timeline? That once again, this timeline is highly debated. So we're going to start over again with this timeline. So it's believed around 2000 BC. You're going to have this move with Abraham over to this area. Okay. Then around 1650 BC or somewhere up in there, you're going to have the move from the Palestinian region over into Egypt. Okay, so they're in Egypt for some years, hundreds of years. Okay, then from there, what is going to happen is your Hebrews will leave out of Egypt again. Okay, and this major movement out of Egypt is known as the Exodus. Get it down. Okay, the Exodus. This, for those of you who are Christians, this is a major book of the Bible. Okay. It is also part of the teachings of Judaism, the Exodus. And their leader was a man by the name of Moses, who was actually a Hebrew. He did not know it in his youth, but he now knows that he's a Hebrew. Okay. And he's the one who is credited with leading the Hebrews out of Egypt. Where are we at on the timeline with this time frame for the Exodus? Some put it approximately around 1300, 1200 BC, somewhere up in there, okay, when he left out. All right. So what happened was the Hebrews are going to be led out of Egypt. I'm going to skip the wandering in the desert for 40 years. And Moses will die. He will not actually make it to the promised land. He'll get to see it, but he won't make it and actually enter it. But what happened was eventually the Hebrews will leave Egypt. This is Africa. This is the Nile River. They will leave Egypt and they will come back over to the Palestinian region. Okay? And when they came back over to the Palestinian region, they basically settled along a river. Okay, known as the Jordan River. Let me see here. Let me find that for you. Let's go here. Okay, they're going to settle. This is called the Jordan River here. Okay, it's a real river. It does exist. The Dead Sea really does exist. All right. And so what happened was they were organized into 12 tribes. Get that in your notes. They were organized into 12 tribes. They were organized into the 12 tribes based on the sons of this man here, Jacob. Remember I told you he had 12 sons? That's why I wanted you to write that down. Okay, so your 12 tribes are pretty much based on that. All right, so at some point, once again, These dates are hotly argued, but some report that maybe somewhere around 1000 BC, the Hebrews established a monarchy. Okay? And when they established a monarchy, they had three powerful kings. The first one, his name was King Saul. Okay, King Saul. All right. His rule was brief in comparison to the other two. All right. But he's considered as the first of the three kings. All right. That's his claim to fame from a secular standpoint. Now, if you're studying from a biblical standpoint, there's a whole lot more to say. All right. But I'm trying to take it from a secular standpoint. All right. The next one, his name was David. One of my personal favorites. David, I want you to get this in your notes. David is the one who established Jerusalem. Okay, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. He's the one who established Jerusalem as the capital for his people. David is a very important figure. They all are important, but David kind of stands out a little bit more. If any of you are Christian and you know of the story, you know, with the slingshot and the giant, that's that David. Okay? All right, so what happened here is David is going to found a dynasty. All right? Okay? And then after David, the next king was David's son. His name was Solomon. Solomon. Of the three kings, Solomon, from a secular standpoint, is considered as having been the greatest. Okay? Some students mistakenly say David because I think more students are probably hearing about King David and, you know, bringing down Goliath with the slingshot and all of that, and they just mark what was familiar to them. But from a historical secular viewpoint, secular meaning worldly, okay, Solomon is considered as having been the greatest. All right. Now, like I said, David's my personal favorite, but Solomon, doesn't matter what my personal favorite is. Solomon is considered as having been the greatest. So you need to be asking, well, why is Solomon considered as having been the greatest of the three kings? Well, because it's under the rule of Solomon when they achieve the greatest growth as far as territorial gain, as far as economic growth, as far as political power, as far as military power. That is what scholars go in to look for when they look for greatness. They're looking for those signs. Okay. David was known as, not David, excuse me. Solomon was known as having been a very, very, very wise king. Those of you, once again, who know the Bible, you already know that it says that in the Bible too. Okay. All right, so what happened here? I'm going to skip over the splitting of the baby, which he didn't split, but the two mamas claiming the same baby. I'm going to skip all of that. If some of you are like, huh, what is she talking about? You can go and read it. Okay, it is in the Old Testament of the Bible, if you're curious as to what I'm talking about. But that will not be on your test, so I'm not going to go into that. But what happened was that after the death of Solomon, okay, the Hebrews split. The Hebrew kingdom split into two kingdoms. Get that down. Okay, put that in your notes. The Hebrew kingdom split into two kingdoms. Right? You had a kingdom to the north, and the kingdom to the north was known as Israel. And then you had a kingdom to the south, and the kingdom to the south was known as Judah. Okay? Once again, you had a kingdom to the north known as Israel, and you had a kingdom to the south known as Judah. All right? What happened? Remember, you had 12 tribes. 10 of the 12 tribes were located here in Israel. 2 of the 12 tribes were located in Judah. Once again, 10 of the 12 tribes were located in Israel. 2 of the 12 tribes were located in Judah. That will probably be a test question. I'm just going to be honest with you, and I will ask you, you know, what were the two kingdoms what were the names of the two kingdoms. Please don't tell me north and south, because I will tell you wrong and wrong. I need Israel and Judah, right? If you want to also add in, you had 12, 10 out of 12 here and 2 out of 12 here, that's fine, but I want names, okay? That is what I'm looking for foremost, is I want the names. All right, so what is going on here is that while the Hebrews are infighting and they have basically divided themselves, okay? They have divided themselves. Meanwhile, the Assyrians have built up to become a very powerful group. This is the time frame the Assyrians are building their military might. And what happened was the Assyrians came around and they swooped down into this Palestinian region, the Levant region. And the Assyrians conquered the Hebrews. Get that in your notes. The Assyrians conquered the Hebrews. All right? Now, what happened was your northern kingdom. And remember, your northern kingdom. Which kingdom is the northern kingdom? That would be the kingdom of Israel. Your northern kingdom fell to Assyrian oppression. Okay, it fell. This is how we get what is known as your 10 lost tribes. Because remember, 10 of the 12 tribes were in Israel. All right, so they fell to Assyrian oppression. Remember, I told you the Assyrians were known for exploiting people. They were very brutal with people. It's not like when the Assyrians came in, they were like, oh, hey, y'all, welcome. Oh, come on, everybody. We're just going to have us a good time. No, they were brutal. Okay, they were very, very brutal. All right, the southern kingdom, it survived. Judah. I didn't say it thrived. I said it survived, and that's a big difference, right? All right, so it survived, but barely. It survived. Meanwhile, what happened to the Assyrians is that the Assyrians eventually fell, okay? Remember I told you the Assyrians fell in, if you go back and you look in your notes, and I told you that they fell in 612. Okay, the city of Nineveh, it was targeted and it was brought down. All right, so what happened was that your Babylonians rose up again. Okay, and we sometimes call these the Neo-Babylonians. What does Neo mean? You look back in your notes to the first part where we had the Neolithic age. Neo means new. Okay, so your new Babylonians have risen up and they're under the leadership of this powerful king known as Nebuchadnezzar II. Very long name. Let me pull that up so you can see his name there. Okay, his name is Nebuchadnezzar II. Right, he was the king, the ruler of the Neo-Babylonians. All right, so what happened was that these, the new Babylonians, they basically came in and they took over the area of, let me see if I'm trying to find it here. I got maps everywhere. But they came and took over the area that the ancient Assyrians used to have. Okay? And basically, the new Babylonians forced the Hebrews of Judah into captivity. Okay, they relocated them. They forced them over into Babylon. So they're being forced back over here to this Mesopotamian region. Now, they did not force the ones in Israel. And why is it that they did not force the ones in Israel? Because Israel is gone. It has collapsed. Remember, Israel has already fallen. It fell, I'm not going to test you on the date of the fall of Israel, the northern kingdom, but the northern kingdom of Israel fell around 722 BC. Okay? So 722 BC, but you got to remember, Assyria is not going to fall until a little bit later. Okay? So what happened here was that when now Assyria's gone. The new Babylonians have taken over what Assyria had and then some, and they have taken the Hebrews that still remain. They have taken them into captivity, and we call this in history, get this down, it is known as the Babylonian captivity. Okay, the Babylonian captivity. Okay. All right, so they're taken captive in Babylon. But this is the deal. What's going to happen next? The Neo-Babylonian Empire is not going to last long either. Why is it not going to last long? Because you're going to have another group from the east known as your Persians. Okay? Your Persians next came in, and your Persians conquered all of that area. So your Persians are going to conquer all of this. All right? And your Persians came in under the leadership of a man by the name of Cyrus. 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 His name is Cyrus the Great. Okay? And they came along and they conquered Cyrus under the leadership of Cyrus the Great. He conquered the Babylonians as well as other groups. And he is the one who freed the Hebrews. Okay? And allowed them to return to their homeland in Palestine. Now, not all of your Hebrews, and I will say Jews at this point, not all of your Hebrews fled or left Babylonia. Some of them had become so indoctrinated, some of them had become so absorbed in the Babylonian customs and culture to where they didn't leave, they remained. Okay? But it's been a lot. These people have gone through a lot. So let's just recap all of this, because there's a lot of movement, all right? And we're nowhere near the Holocaust as far as World War II with Hitler, all right? These people, the Jews, have been through so much. I cannot even stress to you how much they have been through. And I always point out to students, and you don't have to agree with me. It's okay if you don't agree with me. But in my humble opinion, all that they have been through from the beginning of what we have recorded in history, and they still survive to this day, I too am a true believer that they are chosen. I mean, you don't have to believe it, but I do believe it. But anyway, let's go back. Okay, so you start here in Mesopotamia, and remember, Mesopotamia is where the first civilization for the West began. And we credit the Sumerians for starting that civilization. This is the region of Sumer. Okay, so they are down here. They were Mesopotamians. Okay, so you have the city-state of Ur. They're led out of this city-state by the patriarch, the leader known as Abraham. Abraham led them out of the city-state of Ur, and eventually your Hebrews will find their way over here to this Palestinian region. They are monotheistic, whereas everyone else, all the other groups that we've covered, whether it is your Sumerians, your Akkadians, your Babylonians, your Egyptians, the Hittites, the Assyrians, the Phoenicians, they were all polytheistic. But the Hebrews are different because they are monotheistic. They believe in one God. Okay, and so they come here. They eventually settle down in this area, and then Abraham had a son named Isaac. Okay, Isaac had a son named Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons. Right. During the lifetime of Jacob and his 12 sons, there was a famine, meaning lack of food, that hit this area. They left in search of food because they want to survive, right? So Jacob sent his sons to another powerful empire that has food. And that powerful empire would be your Egyptians, okay? So they go down to Egypt. Egypt is bountiful. It has food. It has a surplus, actually, of food. All right, so from there, your Hebrews then relocate from this Palestinian region to Egypt. When they first entered Egypt, they were treated very well, very nicely. Some of you may have heard of how they were given the land of Goshen and all of that. I'm not going to test you on that, but they were treated well. But things changed as the years passed, as more generations, and I mean a whole lot more Hebrews were born, okay? But things changed drastically in a negative way for the Hebrews. They were basically enslaved. Generations later, they were led out of Egypt. They were led out of the oppression that they were experiencing in Egypt by a leader. This leader, his name was Moses. Get his name down. You will see it again. Okay? Moses. The event in leading the Hebrews out of Egypt. I'm going to skip parting of the Red Sea and all of that. But this event is known in history as the Exodus. Exit. Okay? Exit. Leaving. All right. So they left out of Egypt and they left here and they wound up back over here in this Palestinian region. They will settle along a very famous river known as the Jordan River. They're divided into 12 tribes based on the sons of this man, Jacob. These 12 tribes decided that they wanted a kingdom. And so they have put themselves together a kingdom, and they got themselves 3 kings, Saul, David, Solomon. And then after Solomon, this kingdom split into 2. You had the kingdom of Israel to the north. You had the kingdom of Judah to the south. Okay? Then what happened was that during this time, your Assyrians have built up a very powerful empire. Okay, and your Syrians, the Hebrews have divided themselves, so they're not as strong because they've divided themselves. And the Assyrians, meanwhile, have really gained a lot of momentum and a lot of power, and they come in and they take over this area. And then what happens is the northern kingdom of Israel, it fell 722 BC under the might of the Assyrians. So 10 of those 12 tribes are lost. They're scattered. It's what we call the diaspora. Okay, they're just all about. The kingdom to the south, Judah, is still surviving. Meanwhile, Assyria is having problems, and Assyria collapsed. Okay, then Babylon, the new Babylon, not the old one. Not the Hammurabi Babylon, the new one. The new Babylon, it rose up again, all right, under the leadership of a man by the name of Nebuchadnezzar II. And Nebuchadnezzar II was a very powerful king. And he conquered the area where Judah was, and he forced he forced the Hebrews in Judah into captivity, and they had to physically relocate from Judah over to Babylon into captivity. And they were there, okay? All right. So if you know the book of Daniel, those of you who are familiar with the Bible, that's this time of captivity, okay, folks? That's when this is going on. All right. So what happened was that Babylon, the new Babylon, fell. It didn't last long. It fell. And it fell under the oppression of a new group of people known as your Persians. Persians, your Persians. So your Persians are coming in from the east, from Persia, and they're under the leadership of this great leader by the name of Cyrus, Cyrus, Cyrus the Great. And Cyrus the Great will take all of that over, and he's the one who will free the Hebrews out of captivity and allow them to return to the Palestinian region. Okay, so once again, they start here, they wind up over here, then they get into Egypt, then they leave out of Egypt and they come back over in here, then they leave out of here and wind up back over here, then they leave out of here, Babylon, and they come back over here. Okay, all right. Now, Cyrus the Great will come up again when we get to your ancient Greeks. Okay, so I really didn't write his name or type his name in because we're going to cover the ancient Greeks in Cyrus the Great and his descendants, Darius, and all of them will come in and wreak havoc on the Greeks. So, but that is it. Those are all of your notes for test 1. Okay, so if you need to go back and replay the videos as often as you need. All right, bless you all, and I look forward to seeing you. Y'all have a wonderful day and have I'll see you. Bye-bye.